For as long as we've been growing plants, it feels like we've been fighting weeds. But what if we've been looking at this whole thing completely backwards? What if the goal isn't some all-out war, but a smarter, more natural strategy for managing our gardens and farms? Well, let's get into it. We're taught to see any plant we didn't put in the ground as an enemy, right? Something to be destroyed on sight. But what if that's just the wrong mindset? Today, we're going to challenge that idea and reframe the whole problem. We'll start seeing weeds less like an invading army and more like an opponent in a game of skill. And that really gets to the heart of it. This new philosophy is all about successful weed management being a game of knowledge, not just brute force. It's about understanding the system you're working in and learning how to tip the scales in your favor. This is the key mindset shift you've got to make. Instead of this constant back-breaking battle of pulling and spraying, we're going to start treating this like a chess match. See, the goal isn't just to react. It's to outsmart the weeds. We need to understand how they grow so we can create an environment where our crops always have the upper hand. And just like in any game of chess, your first move is to know your opponent, right? You can't just go in blind. You can't have a real strategy if you don't even know who you're playing against. So it's time to gather a little intel. Now, this is absolutely crucial. Not all uninvited plants are created equal. Some, like the clover you see, are actually beneficial volunteers. They can fix nitrogen in your soil and feed pollinators. But others, like the aggressive Johnson grass, are true invaders that will absolutely choke out your crops. So identification is everything. And here's a perfect example of why that identification is so critical. On the one hand, you've got Johnson grass, a relentless competitor. On the other hand, a common reaction. Just till it all under. The problem is, for a weed like Johnson grass that spreads with underground runners, tilling can actually make the problem 100 times worse. You're just chopping up its root system into hundreds of new little plants. It's a classic case of a strategy backfiring. This right here is why knowing your enemy is so important. This is a rhizome. It's an underground stem from a perennial weed like quackgrass. When you just pull or hoe the top off, you're not killing the plant. You're just giving it a haircut. Each little piece of this rhizome can sprout into a brand new plant, which is what makes them so incredibly persistent. So how do we fight back without reaching for the chemical sprays? Well, our first major strategy is surprisingly simple. We're going to take away the right. You see, most weed seeds are opportunistic. They need light to germinate. If they can't see the sun, they never even get started. Think of it this way. A deep, thick layer of mulch is like a blackout curtain for weed seeds. It creates a physical barrier that just stops sunlight from ever reaching the soil. And that one simple act prevents most of those annual weeds from ever seeing the light of day. And the great news is, you've got options. Straw is amazing for vegetable gardens. Wood chips are perfect around trees and perennials because they last so long. And hey, shredded leaves are a fantastic free resource. But the crucial point, no matter what you use, is depth. You're aiming for a solid 4 to 6 inches. Don't skimp on this part. That depth is what makes it work. Okay, we can also use the sun's power in a much more aggressive way. This is a technique called soil solarization. Basically, it's a non-chemical method where you use the sun's own energy to trap intense heat under clear plastic, literally cooking the weed seeds and other nasty pathogens in the soil. And the process is actually pretty straightforward. You clear the bed, get it nice and smooth, and then, this is a key step, you water it really well. Wet soil conducts heat way better than dry soil. Then, you just stretch a clear tarp tightly over the top, bury all the edges to trap the heat, and let it bake for 4 to 6 weeks in the summer sun. When you're done, you'll have a sterile, weed-free bed that's ready to go. Okay, that's great for prevention, but what about those stubborn weeds that are already up and growing? This is where we can get a little more direct, but we have to be smart about it. So let's look at a DIY herbicide that actually works. And while we're at it, let's bust a really common myth. So here's the myth. I'm sure you've seen those recipes online that tell you to just go spray weeds with the vinegar from your kitchen pantry. Here's the problem. That stuff is only about 5% acetic acid. For most established weeds, that's just not strong enough. Yeah, you might wilt the leaves for a day, but the plant is just going to bounce right back. This is what you actually need. It's called horticultural vinegar. We're talking 20 to 30% acetic acid. Now that has the power to get the job done. It's the same basic ingredient, but at a concentration that can actually kill the plant for good. So here's the recipe you need to remember. 1 gallon of that strong horticultural vinegar, add about a cup of salt, any kind will do, and a tablespoon of dish soap.
The soap is a surfactant, which just means it helps the mixture stick to the leaves. Now please, I cannot stress this enough. Pay attention to that caution. This stuff is a non-selective killer. It will damage or kill any plant it touches, your grass, your flowers, your prize-winning tomatoes. Use it very carefully, maybe for cracks in the driveway or paths.
All right, let's zoom out a bit and look at building a more complete system. Our next strategy isn't about killing weeds at all. It's about enlisting allies, both plants and animals, to help us out. The goal is to create this integrated ecosystem that, for the most part, can police itself. This is the idea behind companion planting. You use certain plants to help out other plants. For example, some marigolds actually release chemicals that suppress nearby weeds. How cool is that? Or you can plant dense herbs like oregano to act as a living mulch, physically crowding out any competitors. And of course, there's the classic Three Sisters garden. The corn, beans, and squash all work together to create a canopy that shades the ground, stopping weeds from getting a foothold. It's a brilliant way to let nature do the weeding for you. Now, on a larger scale, we can even bring in animals to do the work. This technique is called prescription grazing. It's the targeted use of livestock to control very specific invasive plants, like these sheep, which are being used to manage an outbreak of yellow star thistle. And what's really fascinating is that different animals are specialists. Cattle are great for mowing down tough grasses, but sheep and goats are incredible weed managers. Sheep love to eat broadleaf weeds, while goats will go to town on woody shrubs. It's all about matching the right animal to the right problem to manage huge areas in a really natural, effective way. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Mulch, solarization, smart herbicides, and even bringing in natural allies. Now let's tie this all together into what is, without a doubt, the single most important concept we're going to talk about today. And that is the many little hammers approach. Look, the big takeaway here is that there is no magic bullet. I wish there was one, but there isn't. True long-term sustainable success comes from layering all of these small, effective strategies together. A deep mulch, plus smart companion planting, plus maybe some occasional careful spot treatment. That creates a system that is way more powerful and resilient than any single method could ever be on its own. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Maybe this relentless chase for a perfectly sterile, completely weed-free garden is the wrong goal in the first place. What if instead we aimed for a healthy, balanced, and resilient ecosystem where weeds aren't an enemy to be eradicated, but are just a minor player that we manage as part of a thriving, living whole? Something to think about.